You are listening to the Information Security and OSINT podcast, episode 15, originally released on July 10th, 2020. My name is Josh Amishav. This week, we're hanging out with Chris Dale. Chris is the founder and principal consultant at River Security, a specialist company operating out of Europe. Chris is also a SANS instructor and teaches the hacking techniques, exploits course, as well as the Purple Team Tactics course. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, man.
All right, Chris, let's start. For those who aren't familiar with you, how did you get started in InfoSec?
My start, I was just a kid, raised by my older brother, and he was a computer geek, and I got interested in hacking when he infected my laptop, or actually my desktop, with a rat. So he had a NetBus running on my system, and he would make my CD-ROM go open, close for like an eternity. And I was like, what the hell is wrong with my computer? I went to my dad, I went researching and just trying to figure out what was wrong. And I couldn't, of course, do nothing because I was such a noob. And eventually my brother came clean. After weeks, he came clean and said, look, Chris, you remember that game I sent you, Whack-A-Mole? I'm like, yeah, really fun game. But yeah, it's actually a Trojan. So when you play that game, you installed my program and I could control every aspect of your computer. And I was intrigued, to say the least.
Wow. So then, okay, so you started, that was, I guess, the interest. Then you were doing some sysadmin work? Is that right?
Yeah. So actually, after that, I didn't really have that great plan of I knew that hacking was very awesome. I was very interested in the scene and so on. But I just finished school. I did my certificate of apprenticeship within service electronics, so small scale electronics. I was working as a tire repair dude. I was working at hotels. Eventually landed a job where I was doing service electrician work for Rolls-Royce. I was doing troubleshooting and PLC programming, and it was getting interesting, right? But I wanted to zoom out and get into IT. So after my military, I went on mandatory military service for a year. I decided, look, it's time for a change. It's time to do what you were meant to do. So I basically resigned and I focused full-time on school. And I did a bachelor's degree in informatics, and I landed a job as a developer. I did actually work full-time for the first 2 years of school. I did work full-time as a service electrician while I was studying full-time online as well.
And then making that jump from a programmer to InfoSec, how did that work for you?
Yeah, so I was thinking, as a developer, I had this idea that, look, if you're going to become a hacker, you have to be a developer, and that's the best way of moving into hacking. And it turns out that I was somewhat right, but I was sold on the idea. So I was clamoring and holding fast on this development notion that this was the only way. And I actually almost turned on an awesome opportunity to move into IT operations, because I was basically headhunted internally in the organization, where they asked me if I could come aboard IT operations and help them build out their infrastructure and so on. And I was the first one to say no. I was like, no. I'm going to become a lead hacker. So I want to be developing. I want to become that expert developer, and I can move into hacking and so on much more easily. But then I realized, Chris, you're actually wrong. Because if you spend 20% of your time, you can become 8% proficient within, say, for example, Java Enterprise, right? You can become good enough with 20% of your time. And I've already spent 20% of my time doing programming. So I felt confident. I can do anything within development, I felt. But then I was thinking, look, if you're going to hack something, wouldn't it be very cool to see the middleware and applications and the databases and the network and how everything is tied together? I mean, that's what you're going to see on IT operations. So I actually realized that, look, I can't let that opportunity pass. I need to resign as a developer and move into IT operations for my own good. And that's when I started learning about Solaris, for example. And I got hands-on Linux the hard way, where we didn't have Stack Overflow and we didn't have the Googling that we had today. I mean, it was much harder, right? So you were stuck with the keyboard and had to figure stuff out. You had to RTFM a lot of times. And it was just one of the greater experiences that I've had. It was awesome.
Yeah, that 80-20 principle, that's gold. It's especially in career development, that's a very smart move.
Yeah, it's just brilliant. If you can keep that in back of your mind often, you will remind yourself that, look, becoming an expert in something will require the last 80% of your time to get the last 20, right? That's the thing. Do you really want to become an expert in Java Enterprise, in PHP, in Node.js, when you can do, like, you can probably do shortcuts the other anyway to use libraries, whatever, to circumvent that requirement of being an expert?
Very true. Now, one of the things that you recently wrote a blog post about, I found it very interesting that in terms of pen testing, you were splitting it up between the actual vulnerability assessment, or the actual pen test, and the Recon segment. And then you mentioned that you thought that the Recon segment should be its own testing, and then after that be the initial phase, and then you present the findings to that to the client, decide on the scope, and then actually do the pen test. So I want to dig down into the into your Recon process. How does that work?
Right. So a Recon process, so as you said, separate engagements from the pen test. And there's a lot of important reasons why, okay? And we can drill down into that and talk about that for hours probably. But the Recon process for us, it starts out with them wanting us, they want to hire us. They want to have offensive services. They're probably looking for some kind of pen test. And instead of like telling the client, like, yeah, let's do a pen test for this, or the pen test tells us what the pen test should be on, we basically tell them, hold on, how do we know what to pen test? Because the moment we start working against you and working like in offensive engagements with you, we're going to find all kinds of assets that we would much rather like to pen test. We would see all kinds of openings, and that would then turn into scope creep, and it would make it harder for the pen testers to basically feel good about the engagement, because they are stuck pen testing this area of the scope, whereas they discover something new that they should have found earlier, and they want to go over here and do the pen testing over here. So this splitting, and basically, you're not just doing reconnaissance. I mean, we're not just doing reconnaissance. We're actually doing reconnaissance, scanning, enumeration, OSINT. We're doing that whole, we're touching the environment. We are doing the port scanning of all 65,535 ports, for example. We are touching them, but we're not doing anything offensive. By doing this, and it's a not that big of an engagement, it's kind of small, we are actually building out a digital footprint for the customer. So we get an overview of what they actually expose. We find the mobile applications. Oh, they forgot about those. Yeah, they had mobile applications using APIs to the backend. Of course, they should be tested, right? We found all the breaches that they have had that they should address and fix before we start any testing. I mean, wouldn't it suck if all that we had to do was start the engagement, find their VPN, and log on with some leaked credentials, and it's game over, and engagements has won? That would be too easy, right? So we want them to be a bit prepared. So we're giving them all of this information in advance so that they can feel a bit more prepared. They can make an intelligent decision on what they want to keep in scope for the pen test. And perhaps even more important, they will make a decision on what to leave out of the pen test. So they feel that when they buy a pen test or offensive services in general, they kind of have the decision in mind that they're making the right decision. They're purchasing on the assets that they feel that they need to have tested, rather than just some executive's idea that, yeah, we need to have our front web pages tested. That's not where we're going to break in. We're going to break in on the path least traveled. We're going to find those systems that you forgot you had, and that's where we're going to find SQL injection readily available on the internet, right?
Okay, so let's talk like tactical, right? So we've done some episodes in the past about mass DNS, FF, AMAS. Explain to me, like, how do you approach this? What tools are you using? Where are you looking?
Right. So first of all, a lot of my customers are from Europe. I do have some Middle East stuff going on as well, and occasionally I work with clients from the US. But first of all, we approach the target as a company entity. and we want to find their subsidiaries and like sister companies, daughter companies, and consider if they should be in scope or not. Like I will tell my client, look, we have these other companies as well. If I take a look at some of their domains and IP addresses, I can see that some of them are on shared hosting. They're sharing the same data center. Do you guys want to include this or not? And that might become a part of the dialogue. But first of all, I always do this. I graph it out in a Meltigo. I built a map basically of the company structure so that I can make rational decisions on when we decide to leave something out or something in. But basically, it starts with a company, right?
Okay, and then Crunchbase I found is a great tool to find subsidiaries and relationships.
Which one,
Crunchbase.
Crunchbase, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a great one for a lot of different companies. And if you go into the different countries themselves, say go into Belgium, you go into Netherlands, you go into Norway, and so on, you will most likely find a country proprietary website or search engine that allows you to search up companies and find like company structure and so on. But that normally requires some regional insights and basically all you need is a friend or a colleague in that country. And you ask them, hey, how do I search for a company in your country? And they will probably give you the URL or the website where you can query for company information.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, so you have the country, you have the companies, you have the subsidiaries, and then what's the next step?
Then we start with the not the high level domains, but the top domains that they have, right? So nameofthecompany.com, for example, and depends on where you are based and where you're doing work. But say for Norwegian domains, we have this beautiful search engine that is behind. It's behind like CAPTCHA, but the registrar for Norwegian domains.no will allow us to prove that we're not a robot, and we can take that company name or their organizational number, and we can see every single domain that this company has registered for NO domains. So it's just like, bam, in your face, tons of attack surface, which is beautiful, right? That's just so awesome.
Is that similar to like say Vue DNS has like a reverse whois lookup? That'd be similar to that technique.
Similar to Vue DNS, and it's for free, and it's very powerful. So that gives us a starting point, right? So if you're not working for, say, Norwegian domains, you would work for something else. Vue DNS, I love that. I would love to have such a service, but you have to realize that they might be wrong. They might not have all the information, right? So don't trust the data you're getting back, as this is complete data. Always expect that the tools are giving you the 80% for 20% of the effort. You might have to work for those remaining 20% of data that you're missing, and that just might be where you're going to break in, right? So you have to do your searching, your Google searching, and your reconnaissance further on those top domains because you need to find them.
Okay, so let's talk about that 20%. You mentioned like you Google, say Google Dorks, and imagine other search engines as well. We've talked in past about DNS brute forcing, and I imagine that'd be a significant portion, a significant component of that finding the other 20%. I personally like mass DNS for this. What have you found useful?
So we actually built a tool at my previous employer that we were using for this. It's called Subfuzz, and we have open sourced it on GitHub, and it's an amazing tool. It's a tool that I trust. I know exactly how it works. It's open source, etc. And also has some modules that will integrate with, say, for example, cert.sh. It will integrate with VirusTotal and so on to help you build out that attack surface. I'm not that big into the modules themselves because I do like the automation aspect, but once something becomes blurry in my process, I feel that I'm not completing that point to the fullest. Like I still feel that there's things for me to look for, and I want to have the process very transparent, and I want to know exactly what goes on within, say, a module, for example. So. But yeah, Subfuzz is called, and it's an amazing tool, and that will help me find subdomains for a given top domain, right? So I will basically enumerate and brute force. You don't have zone transfers anymore, so you will brute force all the different subdomains that you can find. And this is actually quite important. First of all, you need to have a very good word list for this type of activity. You want to have a word list that is not only good in general, you want to have it focused against a target as well. So once you find, say, web servers, you want to crawl through these web servers and build word list that contains that nomenclature, that specific language that this organization is using, because they just might name their servers part of like based on their, say, product line, etc. One of my customers actually is actually ex-customers from previous employer. They manufacture ice cream. So I was very lucky to have the two major ice cream manufacturers in Norway as my customers, right? Very cool on-site engagements because they will give you ice cream for breakfast, for lunch, and even if you stay for afternoon, they will give you fresh ice cream as much as you want. It's awesome. But basically, one of these customers, they had every single ice cream that they had, say the sandwich and the Kronais and the Diplomies and so on. They had these ice cream names. Every single ice cream was also a server in their environment. And that's how you would enumerate their stuff, right?
Okay, now TomNomNom has a tool specifically for that. Is that what you're using, or how do you what's your approach to taking the content of a web page and turning that into a web list?
I'm using Robin Wood's Digi Ninja's tool Qul. It's a Ruby script that basically takes in a depth and a URL parameter, and it just produces quite quickly a list of words. And then I wash that list of words, so I sanitize it kind of with a list of stop words. So I have a dictionary containing stop words, removing all that junk that you don't need to test for, and I'm left with hopefully a quite precise list of words that is going to be nice for this environment.
Okay. And with the one of the things that I've come up with other tools is when you're doing like brute force DNS brute forcing, depending on what DNS servers you're actually querying against, you may get ones that poison your results. So then you have to do a step beforehand to verify that they're giving valid results. Have you come across that as well?
Yeah, so a little bit of a deception in play, right? They're basically trying to trip your tools into giving, say, every result to be giving a response. It depends on how they do this, but the last time I had this against me, they were poisoning every result. So my tool would return every query to be true. And it wasn't a big deal for me because, first of all, I ran my tool, I output to a comma-separated value file, and I would just grep -v, so exclude everything containing the poison result, and there I am sitting with the attack surface again. So for me, it was just a matter of filtering the output a little bit, cleaning up, and it was not a big deal for me.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Okay, so at this point, you've brute forced. We have a list of domain names. We have a list of. We've got a list of the initial attack surface. What's the next? At that point, do you start digging in, running like a mass scan against all the ports, or what's the next stage?
Right. So first of all, there's a lot of more steps involved in the reconnaissance and OSINT collection phase and so on that we're gonna have to go through and hopefully try to automate as much as possible and make automation so it doesn't look like a glorified click button pony, so that you actually get the insight you need as a pen tester to realize if the tool was successful or not, etc. But once we are done with that phase, we normally move into the port scanning phase for sure, and also the discovery of services. So the port scanning phase, it's quite important, of course. You want to port scan every single port, at least for TCP. You want to try that and see what type of attack surfaces is here. Then you want to move into the different services. Say, for example, on HTTP, you're going to have middleware. You might have load balancers, reverse proxies. You're going to have an application hosted. Perhaps you just see a splash page that is just IIS 10, for example. Then you want to do content enumeration across that splash page to find what the endpoint is where they're hosting the application. You also might want to do vhost enumeration. So when you're trying to attack the target, you might be lucky and find additional virtual hosts on the system. So that would be something for you to also try to brute force, etc. And this is where you need to be a bit more careful because you're now engaging directly with the target, and you need to be careful that your tools are not crashing something and they're not like taking up too much resources, for example.
When you mentioned in the blog post that you're splitting up Recon and the pen test, what percentage would you say should be devoted to the Recon as opposed to the actual the pen test?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're normally about a 30-70% split, normally, right? So we do that. We try to keep the reconnaissance and scanning phase and so on. Basically, a digital. We call it just a digital footprint or attack surface mapping. We try to keep it as small as possible, but at the same time, let the technicians, the pen testers, feel confident that they've done a good job at this phase. And that often turns out to be 30% of the engagement that we're selling.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's every time we have a guest on the show, we have a couple of journal questions we ask. So, what area what skills would you like to improve on?
Right. So, in terms of, I've always dreamt of doing exploitation and reverse engineering to the level where the real professionals, you're just like in the Matrix. The code just automatically, you recognize everything. You see a block of assembly code, and you just go, yeah, that's a double for loop, easy mode, right? I'm not there yet, and I'm probably not gonna get there because we don't get those opportunities very often, and it's only during CTFs and war games, etc., where I get to play around with that kind of stuff in a challenge setting. So I don't think I will get there, although I do love that field, and it would be very cool. I just don't think it will be worthwhile in terms of will I be able to earn money off this and do work on this? Probably not, right? But that's the dream, right? It's really cool and fun to hang around in assembly and in low level on the computers.
Definitely. All right. The next question is, what contrarian view do you hold in AppSec, and why?
So I do like to poke people with my elbows and take some space because I do. There's a lot of things that we've been doing wrong in this business, I think. So, I mean, I do push a lot of buttons in terms of, say, grumpy old men making decisions on behalf of the company by just saying, no, you can't have this, because they don't understand the potential in IT. They basically turn into 8 to 4 per people in the organization, and they don't study, they don't go in depth of what's actually possible in the organization. So they're just used to saying, no, you can't have this. No, you shouldn't do this. No, of course you can't install OBS because it's gonna have vulnerabilities in it. WordPress, you want to go for WordPress? Are you crazy? Haven't you heard WordPress is getting hacked? And I'm like, come on, this is ridiculous. Everything's getting hacked. Some things more vulnerable than other things, of course. But look, it's all about yes. It's all about saying yes. You don't have to say no. You want to move to the cloud? Yes, you can. You want to put out healthcare data online in an API? Yes, you can. But here's how you do it. If you cannot say yes, but you might not have the talent or the expertise yet, you might have to ask someone else to come in and advise you how these things are possible. So there's always a yes, but, and believe me when I say it's more or less always yes, but. In Norway, I can log on to my patient records. I can log on to the hospital right now, pull out my core records where you can see what type of diseases I have had and so on. And all you need to know my birth number, not my full identification number, my birth number. You need my phone number. With those two things, I will get a pop-up on my phone where I can click yes, put in a 4-number PIN code, and you're in. That's it. Basically for every people in Norway, that's how you log on to stuff. And is that secure? Is it secure enough, I might ask? Yeah, it might be secure enough. The SIM card is in charge of the process of making the pop-up. And in fact, the pop-up it's put in front of the login screen as well. So you don't have to unlock your phone to click yes and accept that authentication. But is it secure enough for most people? Sure, it might be. And like that, we've built this digital society, which is quite resilient. It's not perfect, but we're not looking for perfect. Perfect is really hard, but we can get to a point where it's probably good enough. And we can deal with the issues that might arise from this type of stuff. So I do like to say yes. I don't like to say no in InfoSec.
That's a good way to go back to the 80-20 principle we talked about in the beginning.
Exactly, right? It's like this golden rule for our life.
Wow, awesome. Okay, and the last question is, do you have a tip or a skill that you can share with the audience?
A tip or a skill that I can share. So, right. There's a bunch of things that you can do during reconnaissance, scanning, and discovery, which is going to be super important. Some of the things I've talked about before as well, some of the things you will find in my presentations and so on. But I mean, if you think about what you're trying to provide to your customer, I'm not talking about bug bounty programs here that much, although that would probably account for this as well. But think of your customer. What do you want to help them with? Why are you doing a pen test? To make them more secure and resilient against cyber attacks. You don't want them to fall victim to some kind of cyber attacker tomorrow. So what I've found to be incredibly helpful is credential stuffing. It is just amazing doing credential stuffing against their different services. Where we have, for example, say, I query through, say, BreachSense, which you know, of course, Josh. I query through the domains of my customers, and I find, say, 20 leaked credentials. I take all those credentials, and I try those credentials everywhere. I try it for their company's DNS provider. I try it for their social media accounts. I try to log on to their VPNs across all of their software as a services. I try to log on to their cloud providers. I try to log on everywhere with these credentials that have been previously leaked, and I see if any of them work. And I'm amazed at how many times I can break into a customer by just trying leaked credentials. And when you start doing this a bit more advanced, so one of the things that we do during reconnaissance is we go through, say, LinkedIn, and we make a list of all the employees of the target company. And then we flag out, we mark in red every C-level director, every director, C-level executive, etc. Those are reds. Then we have the yellows, which are workers in IT, say developers, IT operations, and so on. And then we have green, which is basically people working with some kind of people processing, like help desk and receptionists, etc. Right? What we do with the yellows, the IT teams, we target them individually, querying for their private leaks as well. Hey, Chris Dale, maybe he has a leaked credential on his private Gmail account. That password that Chris used for his Gmail account might work for one of his work accounts. It might work on GitHub. It might give you access to a Stack Overflow account. It might give you access to something else. So we actually pivot and we go deep in terms of credential stuffing, and it pays off. And keep thinking, what is the modus operandi of the attacker? They like to do this kind of stuff. They like to pick the low-hanging fruits and break in with the least resistance, and that's often through credentials. So we have to do this on behalf of our customers.
Wow. Thank you for the pig. That is great. And that is exactly why we started BreachSense, to stop credential stuffing attacks. So that's great. All right. That's it for today. If you have any feedback or questions, please contact me at podcast@breachsense.io. I'll leave a link in the show notes to the tools that Chris mentioned. And if you got value from this episode, then please share it with a friend. See y'all next week.